After the huge success of the original Super Mario Bros., there was no doubt that a follow-up would have to be made. This did end up happening, just maybe not as smoothly as Nintendo had hoped. A sequel would get exclusively released in Japan as Super Mario Bros. 2, which was designed with the mindset of people who mastered the first game could probably play this game if they wanted a good challenge. As a result, we got one of the most difficult and notorious Nintendo games ever released, and that feeling was mutual for Nintendo of America at the time too. Okay, as much as I can complain about the original Mario 2 being a pain in the ass, the game's stupid and dumb difficulty was not actually the main reason why it got rejected. Another major factor was that Nintendo of America felt that this game looked and felt a little too much like the first game. So they pretty correctly figured gamers wouldn't want to buy a sequel that just looked the same as the first game. Kind of funny how times have changed. So with the original Mario 2 being rejected, Nintendo would need to come up with a plan B. This leads me back to Japan for a bit. In 1986, there was a prototype for a game that was being developed by Kensuke Tanabe, in what would be his first ever major video game. And this is where the story takes a pretty interesting turn. While this game was being developed by Tanabe, he was also getting help from a team that was led by Shigeru Miyamoto himself. Initially, the prototype was going to be heavily focused on vertical scrolling, with cooperative two-player action. It also included characters picking stuff up and throwing them, while also traveling upwards in levels as they continued playing. But Miyamoto wasn't really satisfied with how the prototype was turning out, so he had his team add in traditional Mario-like side-scrolling, with his main demands being to make the game more like that, stating as long as it's fun, anything goes. The Mario-like prototype would continue development until Nintendo were approached by the Fuji Television Company to create a video game featuring mascot characters from Fume Kojo. So Tanabe decided to take this Mario prototype and turned it into a game with different mascot characters. This led to the creation of Fume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, released in Japan of July 1987. It would become one of the best-selling Famicom games ever, which meant it was likely going to be brought overseas, and it would. But around the same time Doki Doki Panic was released in Japan, Nintendo of America had rejected Super Mario Bros. 2. So to fill that game's slot, Nintendo of Japan decided to do something pretty out there. With Doki Doki Panic doing so well, it was decided to take that finished game and just revert it back into being a Mario game, just like in its prototype stage. And this retooled version of Doki Doki Panic would get released here as the new Super Mario Bros. 2. Obviously, the Doki Doki Mario 2 thing is pretty common knowledge nowadays, but I just found it interesting while doing research for this review that, while yes, the game did release as Doki Doki Panic first, the fact that the original prototype was already trying to be a Mario-like game, and the fact that Miyamoto himself was also pretty heavily involved with it, that's kind of insane and really fascinating to me. Honestly, I see Super Mario Bros. 2 as way more of a Mario game now than I did before I made this review. By the way, Doki Doki Panic never saw a release outside of Japan, but the reverted version of it for the American Mario 2 did get released in Japan in 1992 under the new title Super Mario USA, mainly because they couldn't call it Mario 2 because they had the original Lost Levels Mario 2, but knowing that Doki Doki Panic was a pretty popular Famicom game, imagine how weird it must have been to get this new game called Super Mario USA, and it was just a modified version of Doki Doki Panic. When it comes to my own personal experiences growing up with what I like to call Mario 2 USA, I'm pretty sure the first time I played it had to have been the All-Stars version. However, this is actually the one game I think I played the least. It's kinda weird, I don't have too many memories playing the All-Stars version. And yes, this means I booted up Lost Levels more than I did Mario 2 USA. I'm sure like a lot of other people, the most experience I had growing up with this game was with the 2001 Game Boy Advance port, Super Mario Advance. This was one of the first games I ever got for my Game Boy Advance SP, and I still have my copy after all these years. It was such a charming and fun version of the game. I think I remember playing it so often that on the rare occasions I did boot up Mario 2 USA on All-Stars, I was kinda confused by the different design changes and lack of voice clips. Child me was a dumbass. But when it comes to the original NES version, just like the other games, I've only ever experienced it in emulators. This version didn't really seem worth it to me since I had Mario Advance anyways. Why not play the superior version? I didn't even get Mario 2 USA on Virtual Console either, which is strange because back in 2008 when I got my Nintendo Wii, my sisters and I bought Mario 1, Lost Levels, and Mario 3 on the NES Virtual Console, but not Mario 2 USA. Actually, I do remember the reason why. One of my cousins, who I refer to as Bojo, came over one day to help us buy games on the Wii Virtual Console, and I think I remember we were going to buy Mario 2 USA since we grew up playing it with All-Stars and Mario Advance, but for some reason, Bojo told us not to buy that game because it sucks and to buy the other Mario 2, referring to the Lost Levels. I don't know if Bojo was maybe misinformed or something, but that was one of the reasons why we never really bought Mario 2 USA on Wii Virtual Console. Or maybe Bojo knew how painstakingly hard the Lost Levels was, and just wanted to fuck with us, so thanks Bo. I guess while on the topic of thinking Mario 2 USA sucks, this leads to me talking about one of my favorite things ever on the internet, which I was able to come across as a kid all thanks to the American version of Super Mario 2, the Irate Gamer. What is this intro song even from? It's gonna forever be branded to me as the Irate Gamer theme song.
Mario is perhaps one of the most recognized video game icons of all time, but when you line up all the Super Mario games in order, one of them just sticks out like a sore thumb, and that game is Super Mario Bros. 2.
Really? I actually would have said Yoshi's Island because despite the title, it's a fucking Yoshi game.
Now, I know what you're thinking, that I'm gonna sit here and attack Super Mario 2. Well, before you start sending your hate mail...
Chris, don't you think you have enough?
No, I don't really hate Mario 2, but when you compare it to the other Mario games, this game just has ass written all over it. There's no coin boxes, no Goombas, no turtles, and worst of all, the ending boss isn't even King Koopa.
You mean Bowser?
Instead, we are treated to a whole new cast of goofy and oddball characters. Things like Sniffits, Shy Guys, and Bob-ombs.
Yeah, good thing these new characters never became long-standing staples of the franchise.
Mario is the regular fighter, Luigi is the high jumper, Princess Peach can hover in the air for extended periods of time, and Toadstool, well, he's pretty much worthless.
Toadstool? You mean Toad? Toadstool is Peach's American name. Also, isn't Toad like a really popular character for Mario 2?
Secondly, this game is only a one-player game. It's totally different from the original in which you could play 2 players. Mind if I play? Sorry man, this is just a one-player game. Well, that sucks.
I guess Chris never heard of the concept of taking turns. Wait, that's literally how the first game's multiplayer operated.
And after you collected that 5th cherry, you gotta wait for it. Ugh, look at this shit. Could it move any slower?
You slowed down the footage!
I can take a shit faster than this.
Then take that shit!
You didn't wash your hands!
And a bonus game called Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. Released only in Japan, this game continues where the first one left off. All the same enemies, power-up items.
That's the poison mushroom, Chris.
So, now that we have the newer version, we can now destroy the original. That's exactly what I was thinking. What the hell you think you're doing? Face it, your reviews suck.
Did Chris just self-own?
Time for some flower power.
What?
What happened to his gun?
I'm getting you for this. Ah!
Iconic. I actually kinda respect Chris for leaving these old reviews up despite all the hate he's probably got from them over the years, so please don't go harass him over me making fun of him in this video. This review's like over a decade old, it doesn't matter, so please stay civil. Anyways, let's get to actually talking about NES Mario 2 USA, which I never got to play through all the way until this review. The plot of Super Mario Bros. 2 is actually pretty smart looking back at it. Basically, Mario has a dream where he's climbing a staircase, which is shown off in the manual, and he finds a door at the very top. This leads to him falling into a new world called Subcon. Get it? As in subconscious? While there, voices apparently cry out for Mario's help, as Subcon has been taken over by the evil King Wart and his minions. So Mario, along with Luigi, Peach, and even Toad, decide to venture through the Dreamland to save Subcon. So yeah, this whole game is just a dream inside Mario's head, which was actually pretty genius because it could easily excuse any amount of weirdness in this game, along with justifying why some characters like Wart just didn't appear in future Mario games. With a whole new world to explore, that means it's gonna be home to new enemies and mechanics. The gameplay of Mario 2 USA is a side-scroller like the first game, but a few things were changed around. For starters, you can go left and right without any issue. The screen no longer locks itself. You can't jump on enemies to kill them anymore, but there is a new mechanic where you can hop on them and lift them up, or even pull vegetables out the ground and toss them at other enemies. It's a simple but kind of fun mechanic. You also have a new power squat jump, which I just call the super jump, where if you hold down long enough, the character is going to start charging up, and pressing the jump button will make you do a higher jump. It's not required to use in levels, but it could still be pretty helpful in some cases. You have the option to play as 4 different characters and they all have their own unique abilities. Mario appears to be the most balanced. He's probably the best one to start out with since he's the title character, but he also might be the least unique out of everyone. Luigi isn't as fast as Mario, but he has the highest jumping out of everyone. It's almost like a refined version of his jumping from the Lost Levels. Toad is the fastest character on foot and can pull items out the ground the quickest, but the one downside to him is that he has the worst jumping. Strangely enough, when growing up playing this game with others, I noticed a lot of people would usually pick Toad. I guess his better ground speed and pulling is really helpful, but I personally felt that Mario was a better choice. I guess it just depends on preference because, when it comes to Peach, she has the worst stats in comparison to everyone else. She's slow on foot and pulls stuff out the ground the slowest. But despite her jumping also not being the best, she's still my personal favorite to play as because of her awesome gliding ability. This move is super cool to use, and I love how future games will reincorporate it, especially Smash Brothers. I gotta say, Peach being playable in this game is actually way cooler than I think people might have realized. At the time of this game's release, she only had 1 other appearance in a game, or if you want to count the Lost Levels, 2 appearances, and she was a damsel in distress last time. But now you're getting to play as her in the sequel where she can even fight off the main bad guy. I know this game is technically just a dream, but that's honestly kinda sick that the series did an idea like this so soon after the first game. Though that does beg the question, why is Mario dreaming about being his love interest? Something you may have noticed is how the characters have a health bar now. You start out in levels with just 2 hearts. Getting down to 1 heart will make the character shrink down like the first game. And their sprites look awkward as hell in the NES version. I mean, Peach and Toad look alright, but what is happening with Mario and Luigi? You can replenish your health by collecting hearts, which only seem to appear after you defeat a certain number of enemies at once. It's a little difficult to know how it works in the non-advanced versions. You can actually add more to your health bar too, which leads to me talking about the items. Mainly the Fire Flower wasn't brought back, but some of the other items from the first game do appear. At some points when you're yanking plants out the ground, you can find a magic potion, and placing it on the ground will spawn a door, which will take you to subspace, where if you place it on the ground correctly, you can come across a mushroom. Picking it up will restore your health and add an extra heart slot. So I highly recommend finding mushrooms in subspace when you guys can. But unless you have a guide with you, then you gotta be very lucky and hope you spawn the door in the right spot. Though while you're in subspace, you can still pull plants out the ground and they'll give you coins. This will give you more chances to play a bonus game slot machine that appears at the end of every level. This is the main place to get 1-ups essentially. You also can't seem to skip it, which is a bit weird. There are 1-up mushrooms you can find in the ground, but they can be pretty rare to come across. Something else you can collect in the levels are cherries, and collecting 5 will make a star appear from the floor, which functions exactly like it did in the last game. It's also pretty fascinating when you remember that the first game was going to use fruit instead of coins, and then here comes the sequel which lets you collect cherries. Wrapping up the items, there's the POW block, which seems to have been carried over from the original Mario Bros. Arcade game. Tossing it on the ground will kill any enemy on screen. There's the stopwatch, which can can freeze everything on screen briefly, though like the 1-up mushroom, it's super rare. There's also bombs you can pull to break away certain level structures, and there's even a turtle shell, which I only ever came across in brief bonus areas. Yeah, the items in this game can be super random at points. There's even certain parts of the levels where you can just pull a whole ass rocket out the ground too. This game only has 7 worlds opposed to 8, and most of the worlds only have 3 levels instead of 4, though World 7 only has 2 levels for some reason. The worlds in Mario 2 have a lot more variety in comparison to the first game. While a lot of these levels were made for Doki Doki Panic, a lot of graphical changes did get made for its conversion into Mario 2. I highly recommend the region break video about the differences between both Doki Doki Panic and Mario 2 USA, in case you guys wanted to see what all the changes were. A lot of Mario elements were added in, and this game would also mark the first appearances of certain tropes for future games, like the second world being a desert level for starters. Hell, even the character sprites had a few firsts too. Like, this was the first game where we saw Mario and Luigi rocking their blue overalls, and this was the first time we saw Peach in a pink dress. Just graphically, this game looks quite good for the NES, and it's nice that all the worlds don't look super similar anymore. Another major element that makes each world distinct are the enemies. The Shy Guys, Sniffits, Ninjas, and Tweeters are the most common enemies, but later levels would also introduce other ones like the Pokey, Cobrats, Porcupos, Bezos, Panzer, who's an annoying motherfucker, Sparks, I hate these guys, Albatos, who's mainly used for level progression, and I swear to god he looks like a fucking Pokemon. And then there's the most iconic enemy in the game probably, the Babomb. It's fascinating how some of these enemies were made for Doki Doki Panic, but would still end up becoming staple characters in future Mario games. And some of them are just so outlandish that they just stick with you, while other enemies are so fucking irritating that you're grateful this game was their only appearance. One item you'll have to pick up to get past certain levels are keys, but they're being guarded by an enemy called Phanto. So when you pick up a key, Phanto will fucking chase you. Easily one of the most terrifying but irritating enemies to deal with in this game. I hate this bastard so much, but you can actually alleviate his annoyance by just tossing the key away for a bit, which will make him go away, and he doesn't even bother retrieving the key, so there's no penalty for doing this. Despite some of the obnoxious enemies, this game still just has a lot of charm to it. This was also the first game where traveling upwards in levels is a requirement sometimes, which is a big element that was carried over from the original prototype, along with picking up enemies. There's also just a lot of outside-the-box thinking required to go the right way in levels too. This game can probably be seen as the black sheep of the original 2D Mario games, but I don't think that should be seen as a detriment. This game just has a unique look and overall feel. The music is another element that really enhances it. Composed again by Koji Kondo, and it sounds so much more lively and well made in comparison to the first game. Maybe not as memorable or iconic, but I get the feeling Koji Kondo really got to showcase his music skills here way better than he could have with the first game. It's a fantastic soundtrack and a great follow-up to the original game's music. We even get some rearranged tracks like how Subspace uses a new rendition of the first game's overworld theme, and the Starman music sounds identical too. However, there's also an arranged version of the first game's underground music which goes unused in this game, mainly because there was already a new underground theme which does sound really good. The unused underground music was actually found in a prototype. I recommend giving it a listen if you haven't. It actually sounds a bit similar to the arrangement that would appear in Mario 3. The biggest addition to this game, at least for me, are the boss fights. For the first time ever, we have unique boss fights in a Mario game. There's the 4 main ones you fight, and some of them repeat. And there's a mini-boss at the end of most levels. The mini-boss is Birdo, and there's like 3 variations of her. The standard pink one that shoots eggs that you can grab and toss back at her. There's the red one that shoots eggs and fireballs just to mix things up. And then there's a gray one which only shoots fireballs, meaning you'll have to find other items you can throw at her. When it comes to the main boss fights, the first one is Mouser, who throws bombs and shit that you'll need to toss back at him. You fight Mouser twice in Worlds 1 and 3. The other repeating boss is Triclide in Worlds 2 and 6, who's a 3-headed snake that shoots fireballs. He's easily one of the more difficult boss fights. One of the other two bosses is Fry Guy in World 4, who seems difficult at first, but he's actually pretty easy to deal with once you understand his pattern. He's also the only boss in this game that breaks away in tinier versions, which you also have to squash. The other boss is Claw Grip in World 5. He's a crab that throws rocks at you that you're gonna have to toss back. He's also the only boss in this game that was made exclusively for Mario 2 USA, since he actually didn't appear in Doki Doki Panic. Instead, that game just had you fight Mouser again, meaning you had to fight him 3 times in Doki Doki Panic instead of 2. Claw Grip's name is also pretty hilariously misspelled in the credits as Claw Glip, but that's just 80s English localization for you. Oh yeah, Birdo also has her name swapped with a different enemy named Ostro for some reason? How'd they screw that up? Whenever you defeat a mini-boss or just finish a regular level, you'll have to pick up a magic orb, which will open up a gateway that looks like a bird head. However, before you face off against Wart, you actually need to fight the freaking bird door, which is completely outlandish and weird, but again, very dreamlike. And I appreciate this game doing a very funny twist before the end. When it comes to the big man Wart himself, his fight can actually be super easy, especially if you're Peach. Basically, there's a device in the room called the Dream Machine, which tosses out vegetables for you to pick up, and you have to toss them right into Wart whenever he has his mouth open, which he only does when he shoots out his main bubble attack. It can be really difficult, but as Peach, you can just grab a vegetable and glide behind Wart to toss it at him, so because of this, you can completely avoid his bubble attack. It's pretty laughable. I also guess the main question for this fight is, why does Wart have this machine in his room if it could be used to destroy him? Are you really gonna question that? It's all a dream, it doesn't matter. Beating the game will lead to the subcons getting set free, with the entirety of subcons celebrating, along with Wart's dead body being carried off. The final screen also shows your ranking based on which characters you use the most. It's pretty neat, and I also love how a prototype for this game used to call this screen the prize money ranking system. Oh yeah, and the little cutscene of Mario sleeping is really cute, and the animation looks really good for the NES. It's interesting that they credit all the enemies at the end, 1 misspelled and 2 mislabeled, but none of the developers were credited at all. But then again, I guess that wasn't really common back in this era of video games. Though weirdly, in Doki Doki Panic the developers are credited, but it just wasn't carried over from Mario 2 USA. Strange. And that's kind of it. Mario 2 USA is a relatively short game. Probably shorter than the first game if you're avoiding the warp zones, which are still in this game too, but just hidden differently. The game doesn't have a save feature, but it does make up for it with a really solid continue and checkpoint system. Not sure what else to say. It's a really solid platformer and a decent sequel to the first game. The NES version was ported to the Virtual Console on Wii, which is gone, and the Wii U, which is closing soon. Along with the game being streamable on the NES Online app for Switch, which has save states and rewinding for newer players. This version was also included on the NES Classic Mini, even the Famicom Mini, which like I pointed out in my previous review, is really funny because the lost levels couldn't make the cut, but Super Mario 2 USA did. But wouldn't it have been funny if they just threw in Doki Doki Panic on the Mini just for shits and giggles? Like, wow, Nintendo, what a missed opportunity. Of course, Mario 2 USA would be remade for Super Mario All-Stars in 1993, and it's a really solid 16-bit upgrade for the game. They even fixed the tiny character sprites so they don't look too awkward anymore. This port would also update Luigi's sprite to feature a more purple hue to his overalls. And I just want to say, I think the purple overalls on Luigi is vastly underrated, and more people should talk about it, goddammit. Oh yeah, All-Stars also fixes Peach's sprite to be blonde, since the NES version was only able to make her hair brown. But while the All-Stars remake is a solid version of the game, I wouldn't call it the best. That title belongs to the 2001 GBA remake, Super Mario Advance, which did reincorporate a lot of the same graphics from All-Stars, but it also included a lot of cool updates. There's a save feature now which can also act as a level select, the power-ups were greatly improved, you can find hearts to replenish your health a lot easier, either by finding the new heart plant, or sometimes hearts can just be floating around during boss fights. They also updated it to where if you kill 2 enemies with the same same item, it'll make a heart appear, which is really helpful. There's also just fun updates like the bigger enemies that you can pick up, and tossing them once will give you a heart. There's also bigger items like plants, and even POW blocks that can help you earn more extra lives, along with there being more 1-up mushrooms placed at certain parts of the game. The super jump has a unique animation now, which looks sick. They even made a new boss fight, Roberto, who you fight in World 3, meaning it takes the place of one of the Mouser boss fights in the original game. It's a very simple boss fight, basically just a bigger, slightly difficult mini-boss, but I still really love this inclusion. Oh yeah, and during the end credits, they swapped Birdo and Ostro's names to be correct, and they fixed Clawgrip's misspelling. Speaking of Clawgrip, his boss fight has an intro now, where we see him tiny at first and then he gets morphed into a bigger crab. But I like how his tiny sprite is just the crab enemy from the original Mario Bros. Arcade game. It's a really cute callback. And then there's one of the more charming aspects about the advanced ports, the voice clips.
Here, have some fun. This is as far as you go.
I am the Great Wart. Ha ha ha!
Piece of the cake.
Oh, mamma mia!
I do think the voice clips are a very charming and cute addition, with the exception of Toad. I don't mean to do a voice actor rant for a damn Mario game as early as Mario 2 USA, but holy shit, I fucking hate this Toad voice. It's obnoxious and you hear it almost constantly when you're playing as him in Mario Advance. But hey, this is still the best version of Mario 2 USA, and there's still more extra content in it even after you beat the game, like the Yoshi eggs, and even the original Mario Brothers. So definitely check out this port when you guys can, either on a physical GBA copy, or on the Wii U Virtual Console before it shuts down soon. Seriously, it's a damn shame the Virtual Console is just gonna be completely gone soon, also making it practically impossible to legally purchase a lot of these games. I'm especially upset over the GBA games going away because the emulation for them on Wii U is freaking perfect. I really hope it gets brought back on Switch or something because it'll be a damn shame to see such a great GBA emulator go to waste. In all reality, Nintendo should just stop banking on these online apps and just bring back the Virtual Console normally on Switch. That way the brand won't have to die in 2 months and people will still be able to purchase these games like normal again. But because Nintendo doesn't care about its fans, that's not gonna happen anytime soon. So for all the Wii U users, be sure to grab this game and many other titles on the eShop before they're totally gone. I know some smartass is gonna be like, you could just emulate them on PC. Motherfucker, no shit. I'm just recommending legal ways you can acquire the games. If you don't care and you don't think it matters, then whatever. Just continue pirating everything like you've been doing and let me handle things my way. So yeah, Mario 2 USA is good, Super Mario Advance is amazing, so be sure to check this game out. The next time I look at a Mario game, it'll be the oh-so-iconic Super Mario Bros. 3, which was released in Japan the same year Mario 2 released in the US. I'll delve more into that in a future video, but for now, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next review. Bye!